The last couple of times that I've spoken here, about a third of the way through my sermon, it has just absolutely bucketed down with rain. I've had to yell over the top of the rain, so hopefully that is not going to happen tonight, because I'm preaching on the exact opposite of that. I'd like everyone to just put their hands on their heads like this. That's the time of the sermon. In the book of Job, God spoke to Job through a whirlwind. In Exodus, he announced his presence with an earthquake. Multiple times throughout the Bible, it refers to God's voice like that of thunder. In Psalm 77, his voice is compared to that of thunder and a whirlwind. But God is not always loud. Can you imagine having a friend who always shouts at you? Can you imagine trying to have a conversation with someone who's in your face, shouting at you the whole time? It would be very uncomfortable. You wouldn't be able to talk about anything personal or private, because the whole room, the whole house, the whole neighbourhood could hear this conversation. Loud voices do have their place if you're trying to get someone's attention, if they're a long way from you, or if they're ignoring you. You need to raise your voice to them. But if you're close to them, you don't need to shout. If you have a relationship with them, you only need a few words, or less. Sometimes, in a relationship, you need a lot of words. Some people need phone calls and letters and emails and a 4-hour-long coffee chat just to maintain a relationship. I call this a phone book relationship. This is what it takes to make a relationship. Other people have a post-it note relationship. It only takes a few words to relay what you're thinking. And this is good. How many couples here could relay an entire sentence or a paragraph just by giving each other a look? Raising an eyebrow to one another. Someone squeezing you on the hand or the shoulder. Simple actions that are meaningless to anyone else, but to the two people in the relationship, that touch or that eyebrow could mean, I love you. Can we go yet? Did you see that he's preaching in jeans? In 1 Samuel 23, David and his men are hiding from Saul when they hear the Philistines are attacking Keilah. Against the wishes of his men, David leads his army into Keilah to defeat the Philistines. Saul figures that with David and his men tired from their battle and trapped within the walls of Keilah, now is the perfect time to attack. David learns of Saul's plans and tells his priests, bring the ephod. He cries out, O Lord, God of Israel, your servant has heard definitely that Saul plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender to me? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, tell your servant. And God says, he will. David asks again, will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul? God's answer, they will. Forget for a moment that certain death is marching towards David. Forget that the people he's just saved in this town of Keilah are going to turn him over to Saul as soon as he arrives. At this point, there are 600 adrenaline-drunk, battle-beaten men trapped within the walls of a city that's not their own. The streets are littered with the dead, the doors and windows of every home shut. David reaches out to God for a message. Surely God has some deep, probably detailed thought about this situation. The God who relayed the blueprints for the ark to Noah. The God who gave every measurement and material needed for the tabernacle to Moses. The God who outlined Joshua's plan of attack on Jericho. Surely he had a list of instructions for David. But all God does to break that silence is to give David 4 words. He will. They will. With those 4 words, David had to motivate 600 men to flee. Have you ever tried to motivate 6 people to choose a restaurant for dinner? Verse 12 ends, and the Lord said, they will. Verse 13 begins, so David and his men, 600 in number, left Keilah and kept moving from place to place. Where was the analysis? Between verses 12 and 13, where was the wrestling and triple checking and months of prayer and fasting and getting a prayer group together? There wasn't any. Within the space of 1 verse, David left, and in doing so, saved the lives of his men and the city of Keilah. So what's the lesson? God and David had such a close relationship that God didn't need to give David a phone book of instructions. He only needed a post-it note. He would. They would. God trusted David and knew that David would do the right thing without spelling out every single move he had to make. David trusted God. David trusted that God had given him enough information for now. And David knew that if he needed to know more, God would have told him more. David asked God a question, and God just nodded back. He will. They will. That was the only communication that they needed at the time. But what about the other times? The times when you ask God a question and you don't even get a post-it note. What about the times when God is silent? I mentioned Job earlier, that God spoke to him through a whirlwind. The fact is, before that whirlwind, before that encounter, there's 37 chapters of silence. For 37 chapters, Job's cries to God for help and relief were only met by God's deafening silence. In the Gospels, when word came to Jesus that his friend Lazarus was sick, he didn't rush straight to Bethany. To Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, Jesus' silence could have been interpreted as neglect, that Jesus just didn't care or didn't want to help them. But in Jesus' silences, we, along with Mary and Martha, are drawn into a new closeness with God and understanding his power. Jesus didn't answer their cry for help immediately. Instead, 4 days after he died, Lazarus was raised to the dead, and Jesus displayed his power. Oswald Chalmers says, when you cannot hear God, you will find that he has trusted you in the most intimate way possible, with absolute silence. Not a silence of despair, but one of pleasure, because he saw you could withstand an even bigger revelation. Speaking of Mary and Martha, the other time that they mention in the Gospels is when Jesus comes to their home. Mary sits quietly and listens to Jesus. Martha is rushing around, busy and distracted. I mean, wouldn't you? If Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, showed up for coffee, you wouldn't serve him international roast and a Scotch finger on a stained tablecloth, would you? But Jesus says, Martha, Martha, You who are worried and bothered and anxious about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, that which is to her advantage, that which will not be taken away from her. Mary was sitting silently, listening to Jesus. Sometimes you need long, eloquent prayers. Sometimes you need the latest worship album from Bethel or Hillsong. Sometimes you need to read the Bible out loud and pay attention to every individual word. Sometimes you could listen to podcasts or re-watch one of these sermons on YouTube. But sometimes all you need is silence. We can't really talk about silence without looking at 1 Kings 19, a story I'm sure you're all familiar with. Elijah is on the run from Jezebel. He ran to Beersheba, then he ran a day's journey into the wilderness. After an angelic encounter under a juniper tree, he then travelled for 40 days and 40 nights till he came to Mount Sinai. When he got there, he had a bit of a whinge. It was a bad day. And the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong wind tore the mountain and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. In other versions of the Bible, it refers to the voice as, so in this one it was a low whisper. Others refer to it as a still, small voice or a gentle blowing. The Hebrew word used for still, small voice is the Hebrew word demormo. I'm not pronouncing that right, but it's something like demormo, which can be translated as a whisper, a calm, or a silence. That word, demormo, is used only 2 other times in the scriptures. Here, in Psalm 107, where it says, "They cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He made the storms be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed." Be still. Silence. The other time it's used is in Job 4, where it says, "There was a silence, and I heard a voice saying." So the Lord was not in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire. The Lord was in the low whisper, the still, the silence.
Sorry to be the one to break the silence. This is a song that I would love you to be able to listen to and hear the words that are in it rather than focusing on singing yourself.
I don't know that I want to speak. Thank you, Jono, and thank you, Serenity. I know there's at least one person who requires prayer. Dirk's going to come out in a moment. He's asked for specific prayer. If there's others who would like prayer, maybe silently we can pray for them as well. But Dirk, if you just come out, please. Dirk? Karen wanted to bring him out. Yeah. If the others would like prayer, we're just praying for his sight. Dirk's having a bit of struggle with sight.